Sidney Powell about these eye-opening claims about voter fraud, about Trump, about the Department of Justice. Sidney, we were talking a moment ago about, I raised the issue of the GOP. And here's the Republican Party that would have a vested interest in winning the election, and yet seems to have been either caught napping, or do you think that the GOP was to some degree complicit? Part of the problem, part of the swamp. Which is it?
The GOP was part of the swamp. There is a massive rhino population of swamp dwellers in the GOP and, frankly, in the Trump campaign. Neither the campaign nor the RNC were interested in challenging the results of the election. Everybody just wanted to pack it up and go home. What few challenges were made were perfunctory at best, for show, if nothing else, but were not meaningful or designed to win. It was just the most horrible situation I've ever personally witnessed.
I mean, what
in
makes
the application of the law or any sort of pursuit of truth or justice. There was none except by our contingency and a few others.
So the GOP was raising tens of millions of dollars, claiming that it would fight, it would investigate.
They raised hundreds of millions of dollars, and very little of it was spent doing anything at all.
So a lot of the rot you're saying is in the party itself. It's
completely.
Not just, yeah. Let me talk. Let me pivot a little bit. Talk about this issue of censorship, because I think that this is taking a very bad situation and making it 50 times, not 10, but 50 times worse, because it's bad enough to be talking about whether our democracy is imperiled by systematic fraud. It's another thing to say you can't even discuss it. In other words, this is actually not the America that I emigrated to, coming as an exchange student at the age of 17 in the late 1970s. The two parties had differences, but the idea that you couldn't speak your mind, that somehow you couldn't participate in political debate on relevant issues, that you would be kicked out of the so-called public forum. I mean, this would have seemed inconceivable to me, and yet this is the America we're living through. And my question is, how did we get here? Is this part of the same rot extended out now into the culture? Is it all part of one, you may say, tarantula with multiple tentacles? Or is this a separate problem of these arrogant digital moguls who are in bed with the Democrats and are essentially covering up? Or do they honestly believe that, wow, this is all misinformation, we're doing a public service by sanitizing it? What's going on here with this censorship, and how did we get here?
It's all part of the plan and the cover-up. It has to be, because they were involved in effectuating the plan. Zuckerberg donated over $400 million to the voting efforts, particularly in the key cities where the fraud was the most rampant. And of course, Dorsey and everybody were shutting down any sort of dissent on Twitter. I got thrown off almost immediately after the election. I had 1.3 million followers, I think, all of which, and those were heavily suppressed, not to mention all the shadow banning and all of that went on. But yeah, they threw me off, I think, a day or two after they terminated the president's account. And I knew that was coming too. I knew they were going to cut the president off as soon as they possibly could. And nothing was done about that. And there was plenty of authority to deal with that also.
So what you're saying, in effect, is that now, was the 2016 election a surprise? Because it seems like if anyone who has the power, culturally, politically, to orchestrate a coup of the manner you described, could have done it in 2016, presumably. Is it the case that they thought that Hillary was safe and they were caught napping, you might say, and then they go, wow, this guy Trump got in by mistake. We need to fix the system in such a way that this will never... Is that what happened? How else did Trump win in 2016?
I think it was a pure accident that he won in 2016. I think they ran the algorithm in 2016, thought they had calculated enough and miscalculated and didn't have a backup plan. But this time they had the backup plan and they executed it. And COVID was a great cover for the mail-in ballots, a disease that has a 99.8% cure rate, I think. that they're now still trying to base a national emergency and mandatory vaccinations on? Horse feathers. People are dying from those vaccinations already. They're not even telling people it's not FDA approved. It's all part of their orchestrated effort to destroy this country and make it just another country in the world that's controlled by the globalist elites for the benefit of their power and their wealth. The Nancy Pelosi's and the Chuck Schumers and the Joe Bidens and the Kamala Harris and the Clinton crowd and the Obama crowd writ large.
Sidney, you mentioned what I think is the most striking anomaly from the election, which was the stopping of the count. But two more things jump to my mind as I think about that. A second anomaly was the fact that Biden never even seemed to campaign very hard. I mean, this guy would campaign a couple of hours a day, then he'd put a lid on it. It's almost like he was going through the motions, and in retrospect, that would make sense if he felt that he had it in the bag. Why campaign? Because we have got the process under control. A second thing is that when Amy Coney Barrett came up in her hearings, the Democrats were very insistent that she recuse herself in any post-election scrutiny of what might happen. Remember, the election hadn't even occurred, but the Democrats were curiously emphatic. Hey, Amy Coney Barrett, will you tell us right now that you're going to step aside? So my question is it the case that in retrospect, those facts now make more sense? But that only raises this question, and that is we now have what we thought was a 6-3 majority on a Republican Supreme Court. How did the Supreme Court sort of go Pontius Pilate on us and wash its hands off this matter?
We have witnessed the complete institutional failure of every arm of government and every law enforcement institution in this country to enforce the rule of law, Dinesh. It is that stunning and that heartbreaking. Why they did that, I don't know. I do know that the Communist Party has bought a number of people. It has threatened a number of people. It has blackmailed a number of people. In fact, there's a YouTube video of a Chinese professor talking recently about how they controlled virtually everyone in DC except President Trump. And now he's gone. George Soros does have a huge role in all of this. The organizations he funds and has been funding for a long time have played a substantial role in all of this. We are under attack. We have been under attack since the Chinese flu virus was released, if not before. And it simply converted into a significant cyber attack. And this whole plan to destroy the United States and take control of it and just render it another global entity or vessel state of China almost, if not completely.
So Sidney, what is your, as we close out, what is your verdict? I mean, my wife Debbie, who's from Venezuela, has always had the fear. You can almost call it, a kind of PTSD. I've seen this before. I saw it in Venezuela. She was actually incredulous when she discovered that the same machines developed by Venezuelans to cheat in Venezuela were being used. She could hardly believe it. She's been talking about parallels. She thought she was making a kind of analogy, but she never dreamed it would be the same companies, the same machines. Does this suggest that we are very close, in your view, to becoming a big Venezuela? And if so, would that be curtains for the United States of America?
Yes, we are very close to that. That's what they intend. That's what they want. It simply gives them more power and more control. They're trying to destroy the middle class. All the COVID restrictions and business closures was designed to do that. It's worked very well. The more dependent they can make anyone on crumbs from the government, the more control they have. What they fear the most is an independent, strong middle class. And that is what they've set about to destroy. And they've done a hell of a lot of damage in that regard in the last 2 years. Damage I never thought we'd see able to be done even in the United States of America, but yet they've done it. And too many people have just been sheep or asleep at the switch or whatever and allowed it to happen.
Sidney Powell, thank you for joining me for what has turned out to be an extremely sobering, if not chilling, assessment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dinesh. And I would encourage everybody to go to defendingtherepublic.org and look at the documents yourselves, including the affidavit from the young man from Venezuela who saw how all this was done and was by Hugo Chavez's side when it was created and watched it work. We are dealing with the exact same thing here now.
Thank you, Sidney Powell.